Hey y'all, welcome to an exclusive episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. Bianca Addison, my new co-host, was not able to make it this morning or this afternoon, depending on what time you're watching or listening to this. But I have the distinct and amazing honor of sitting with a friend of mine who is giving us some really amazing intel when it comes to the PWI 2025 Women's 250. She is a podcast host of her own show, the Maps and Graps podcast, a writer who has been featured on Sports Illustrated Wrestling, Blavity, Fightful, and plenty of other places, as well as a writer and committee member for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And she was a part of the decision making process for this year's Women's 250, which was released this morning, today. It's amazing. I'm excited because y'all know this is a women's wrestling loving brand. I am here with Lyric Wrestling, Lyric Swinton. Those are her names. Lyric, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am fantastic and I am just so happy to be sitting with you. And I'm glad that you made time, to talk about this amazing list that was compiled and released today that you helped to craft with so many other amazing minds in wrestling and writers in wrestling. And I'm just really pumped because this is really my favorite part of the year. It really is.
Of course, yeah. It means a lot to me as well, and I felt like it was a lot of us who are on the community will be making like appearances on podcasts and things like over the next few weeks as people like want to know just the ins and outs of like how we create this. And I think it's really important that we prioritize like women creators too, like women podcast. And I think that that was really important. So you're my first stop. I'm super happy and grateful for that, that you had me on. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes, and like I was telling you offline, this is something that should have happened a long time ago, but I am at least happy that we are together to talk about this because we both share a distinct love for women's wrestling. It's all based in the same thing, but of course, it's very diverse in a sense, and I'm really happy to talk about it with you. So, before we get into the list itself, I got to ask you, when did you fall in love with women's wrestling?
Ooh, I would say so. I started watching wrestling in 2006, but I think I specifically fell in love with women's wrestling somewhere around 2007, 2008 when I started watching TNA. I was a huge fan. Like I will say, I wasn't a huge Divas fan, but I really enjoyed the Knockouts division. At that time, with Awesome Kong and a lot of those women were doing there, and then I kind of had like a rebirth for like women's wrestling around NXT, the Four Horsewomen era. I started watching main roster again once they got called up. Like Sasha Mercedes was my favorite wrestler, like immediately from like the moment I saw her. And then, once like I got into other forms of wrestling, specifically like Joshi wrestling, I just fell in love with it. But yeah, it really started with like, I would say like the Knockouts division. That was really what hooked me in when I was growing up.
Yeah, I would say the Knockouts division doesn't get nearly enough credit for what they did for women's wrestling during a time of which it felt like on the mainstream level, it just was not happening. Now, of course, we will always give the Divas credit for doing what they did, with
Absolutely.
what they had, of course. But if you were looking for just that hardcore style of just watching women fight on the level that men do, the Knockouts were very much doing that. They just did not have the same visibility.
Mhm.
But if you actively sought it out, you knew what was real. And I'm so happy that in later years, the more accessible that wrestling has become, especially with TNA and its library, the more people are finding out how amazing the Knockouts division really was and even is to a degree. So I'm really happy that that's where you started because that is a very great place to build your foundation when it comes to women's wrestling. So when did you realize your voice and your pen could fit in the world of wrestling?
Um, so I've always loved wrestling. Like it's been what 19 years since I've been watching, and so like I actually went to college with like the goal of like, you know, working in wrestling. Like my degree is in sport and entertainment management. And but I got really discouraged like while I was in college, just because like at the time, like that was AEW didn't come around until like towards I was almost graduating at that point. But I just remember I'd look at like the internship program for WWE and like everybody was just like white. And
Hmm.
like that everybody that they would accept, and like it was just it wasn't really, I didn't really see myself like, you know. And I remember towards the end of like college, I remember like being somewhat hopeful like when AEW came around, because you know at the time like they had hired like the first ever black woman exec in wrestling, you know, history, which I thought was really cool when what Brandy, but it what but I still wasn't like really convinced like this could like be a thing like for me. But everything really kind of changed around 2022. I actually had like a really bad depressive episode. And I mean for an entire year. I had just finished like this super time consuming job. A lot of most of my friends had moved away. And so like for an entire, almost, I would say like an entire year, I just barely left the house, and like I reconnected with wrestling. And that was what really made me start back going outside. Like, so I went to like my first pay-per-view. I went to Full Gear 22. And then I ended up going to Ring of Honor Final Battle 22. I was in the room when Athena originally won the title. Um,
Wow.
and then I remember at that show, that was FTR Briscoes 2, and I mean 3, which was super monumental. And then I remember that January watching like Wrestle Kingdom, and then I saw like Mercedes debut, and like that completely changed my entire world. Like that, like when Mercedes debuted at Wrestle Kingdom, like that completely changed everything for me. It kind of like really opened up a whole different path of wrestling that I had started. I was obviously into, but like I'm just like being somebody like in that world, like you know, with Japanese wrestling, especially as a black woman. I'm like, okay, like this seems like a thing. And then like I remember Jay Briscoe passed away, and then I was like, you know, I wasn't even supposed to be at that show that like was the final Ring of Honor show. I actually went on a whim last minute. And so I say all this to say a whole bunch of things happening, and it just kind of made me think of just like life is too short to like never really try. And so I turned 25 that year. I turned 25 in February. And then I told myself, I said, for 1 year, I'm going to give this wrestling thing a shot. Like, I'm just going, like, just for 1 year. And I was like, if I get any success out of it, I'll keep going. And if I don't, I'll just go back to like my former career path, and I'll just, you know, do anything else, literally anything else. And so for that, starting then, like I really just committed. Like I started writing about women's wrestling for a site. I started traveling. So I went to Forbidden Door in Toronto. I ended up going to All In at Wembley Stadium. I was going to a lot of like the New Japan AEW shows, following a lot of the Stardom shows, and then I went to Japan, and like that really changed everything like for me. And I was just like, okay, this is exactly like where I want to be, where I feel like I need to be. It was just like to see women's wrestling portrayed that way is like something that I want everybody to be able to experience, of to walk outside of a building like one of the most famous venues in the world, and you just see posters and banners, and this room is filled all for women's wrestling, and this is normal. You go to like there's posters in the streets, and like there's and it's just presented completely differently. And so Mercedes going to Japan really opened a lot of those doors for me to be able to say like, okay, I can do this. Like I can, like, you know, cover this. I can be taken seriously. And so yeah, that played a really big role for me.
Yeah. So what it seems as if it seems like there was a manifestation in your mind and in your soul where you felt like, you know, intellectually you could have a place, but then you didn't see yourself represented at first. But then, of course, after you go through this dark period, wrestling brings you out of it in the form of Ring of Honor and in the form of AEW. They bring you out of it, and then you start to find your voice again. And I think that's really amazing. And I can say, from watching you do these things, it's abundantly clear, that there's a happiness and there's a joy to you. Because when I saw you go to Japan, like I was just like, oh, look at her, she's in Japan, because at the time I was just like, how is it that anybody can really travel like that far? Because as an adult yourself, you're just like, money. But but then at the same time, when dreams like that come true for others, it just makes me so happy. And it's abundantly clear that you came out of that dark space and now you're in this space where you feel like you belong and you matter. And seeing women like you who look like you, and even ones who might not necessarily look like you but are women of color still, reach that high point on that big of a level, it does something to your self-esteem. It makes you want to rise up to the occasion and be who you are. So I'm glad that you overcame those obstacles and you're here on the other side and using your voice and using your pen, pushing your pen the way that you are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a journey. It's still an ongoing journey, but no, I love wrestling. It's changed my life even when I was younger, like and going through things. Like that was always my safe place, to hide in the world. So I never imagined I would do even a little bit of what I've accomplished, and I still feel like I haven't accomplished a lot. But it's definitely still so much more than I ever thought was possible.
Yes, but you have though. As someone, as a person who reads just about everything, now of course time, gets in the way of things sometimes, but as
Mhm.
someone who reads just about everything you do, you have done a lot, Lyric. And I just want to let you know that I see you and you be doing the dang thing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And because you do the dang thing, we have to get to this one of these dang things that came out today. 2025 PWI released, Pro Wrestling Illustrated released their Women's 250 today. The cover is out, the list is out. Of course, you can get it on any digital platform today, but physically, it'll be available next month, I believe. But that is coming up. Strangely enough, time is moving quickly. And of course, you're on the committee, and really, like, I think that's amazing in and of itself. How long have you been a contributor with PWI? Because I will ask you how you became a committee member too.
Um, so it's actually really funny how that happened. I've only been a contributor for about a year now. Unofficially, it's been about 2 years now. And it really started when I was heading to Japan. And I remember I was looking around for um I was trying to figure out like how to get media credentials when I was like that trip came together very last minute, and that's how I know it was really divine, like how it came through. And I remember like I hit up Kevin and I was saying like, hey, like do you have like the email for this person or this person so I can contact when I'm out there. Um and I remember he shared the information, but he was also like, wow, like you're actually going, like, I was like, yeah, like I'm actually going. And he was saying, like, well, we have this spotlight on Japan issue that's coming up at the top of the year. He was like, if you want to write something about, this while you're out there, then sure. And I had never written anything for PWI before. And I was super honored, to be able to do that. And so I went to Japan. I went to, and what I write? I wrote about Noah because I went to a Noah show while I was out there. Um, and that just really kind of started of just like, and because I have like more niche interest than like, a lot of folks in the sense of like, of course, like I write about AEW sometimes, but primarily like a lot of the stuff I write is about like Japan and other places. And so, yeah, it just kind of steamrolled from there. And then later in the year, well, in 2024, I was asked to be on the committee, which I was actually really shocked about. I was really like, I know like people probably think like that's a joke. I was genuinely, honest to God, shocked to be asked on the committee last year. Um, and it was a great experience. And I was lucky to get asked back again this year. And then this year I've been like also an official contributor. So I've written about different stuff, whether it's like show reports from my travels, or exclusive digital interviews, or other a lot of Japanese wrestlers who are doing their first English language interviews with me. So yeah, it's been a really cool experience with PWI. Probably one of the most fulfilling, just because I grew up reading it, and so like to be able to like, there's nothing like being able to like walk through a grocery store and like see something you wrote on the stands. Like it's just like I'm that type of person who just starts crying. Like it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is real. Okay. Like the idea that something that you wrote is up there is just really nuts because I feel like a lot of people, of course, growing up as kids, you sort of imagine yourself on the cover of a magazine.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it also means and it hits different when you contribute to something with your words. And I can only imagine, what that would feel like. But I'm so happy you've gotten that feeling with PWI and they value you. And that trip to Japan really opened up that door. Sometimes it takes those divine moments where you reach out and step out on faith. And
Mhm.
then once you do that, it's just like boom, the whole window just busts open and you get more blessings that way. So that's amazing that you got to do that. So, of course, since the list has grown from 50 to 250,
Mhm.
as the talent continues to grow, um, were you ever overwhelmed as a committee member, to choose who is placed where? Because I can only imagine, as it's grown, the more just how insane you might feel just putting people in different places.
So I didn't feel that way last year, but I definitely felt that way this year. And I think it's a good feeling to have, because that means that women's wrestling is growing, and like um I've only been on the committee since it's been 250. And even like, I'll be honest, like this year we had to have a conversation like we might have to expand this again. I mean, just
Yes.
because women's wrestling, I think that this is probably one of the best years for women's wrestling since I've been a fan, of just across the board on a global level, like on a global level of impact of what we're seeing. Um, there's some really special stuff happening. And so I've just been really proud, just to be on the committee. But yeah, it's definitely really hard, especially because the thing is like when you're filling in like those, I'd say like those top spots, like when you, especially like that first 100, maybe 150, right? It's not easy, but you might not understand the order, but you know who's pretty much going to be in it. Like between like the top stars of AEW, WWE, Stardom over in Japan, is the biggest women's wrestling promotion. And then, when it comes to luchadoras, you have the CMLL, you have AAA, and then you'll have like the super top performing people of the indies. So that's pretty not easy, but you kind of know what to be expected. And then once you get into like that back 100, it's kind of like, oh, you start remembering people, and then you also start forgetting people. Just like, oh, but think about like this little small indie here. Think about this little smaller Japanese promotion that people have been doing really good. And then you have people who've been freelancing. So like they might not even perform for any one single promotion. They've been a little bit of everywhere. And I will say, we have a criteria that really kind of keeps a lot of things, yeah, more concise, and makes it a lot easier. So you'll be like, okay, well, this person's really good, but they didn't have enough matches, so we don't even have to think about them. Or they didn't have this, maybe they primarily wrestled in tag wrestling all this year, so they're not a priority, because this is primarily a singles list. But yeah, it gets really dicey, especially when you get towards the end and you realize like, whoa, everybody who deserves to be here will not end up here, and that really sucks. So, like it's so many people even now that I wish that could have been included, just because they've been doing excellent work. But I have no doubt that they'll end up there eventually. And I'm like it's really exciting, but it's really sad because, like I said, it's just so many amazing people all over the world. Because this is a global list, you know, it's not just American. It's a global list. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I am definitely a fan of you guys expanding it. Make it a 300. I mean, like make it a 300 if you have to, please, because that would be very enjoyable as a reader. I would love it. But hey, I can only imagine just the amount of people that you even have to think about. Like that's really crazy to just, mentally put that together. But it's a good thing you don't have to do that alone. So does it frustrate you to a degree to create a body of work for a fan base that seeks to react before internalizing all of the information? Because you did mention the criteria, and one of the things that people get up in arms about is how come this person didn't make this list, or how come this person wasn't up higher? So, how does that make you? How does it frustrate you sometimes?
It is frustrating, but it's also one of those things to where I realized that, guess what? I used to get upset about these lists too before I knew the criteria. And so like it's actually funny. I don't A lot of people probably don't know. Like I I think one of my first conversations with Kevin was actually me being critical of a list before, and he
Mm.
was explaining some of like the criteria to me, and I was like, I still feel how I feel, just because like I am a typically outspoken person. But and that's one thing I really respected about him was like his ability to take criticism, and still see value in my voice. You know, some people, there's a lot of people who can't take that, like and also. I think that's something that he also respected about me is that, especially once I started writing and doing things, is that um, I he could be critical and I would take criticism well, because like think the for me the base level is respect, like and that's really what it comes down to. Of this is professional wrestling. This is a male dominated sport. This is a white dominated sport. I am neither of those things, and so there will always be a level of criticism, and things that I will always have to deal with. And so like I have very thick skin when it comes to these lists, and I understand like unfortunately like stan culture is real. People are rooting for their faves, and to an extent I get it, but you just kind of really have to, I don't want to say leave your fan card at the door, but it's more so of when you go into those rooms, like the way that I approach the meeting is like when we're meeting about like putting these people in, I kind of like check all the opinions at the door, and I'm like, what are the facts? Like, what is the actual argument for this person? And I think as long as you can say that you stuck to the facts of it all, I think that you can be fine with that. They're going to find something to be mad about. People are always going to find something to be upset about. But yeah, I think it's just about just sticking to the facts, and the good intentions. Is like this is meant to uplift women's wrestling. This is not meant to tear women's wrestling down.
Absolutely. And I see it all the time. And even I have to admit, there have been times where I have questioned, the list, but then it also doesn't take away the idea that the list even exists for me. Because like I said, it's a routine thing for me now. Every year I purchase the women's 250 or when it was the women's 150 because it's for women's wrestling and it celebrates that. So I try to keep that in mind most of the time. But of course, like you say, us as wrestling fans, we get real passionate about the people that we love. As yeah, sometimes that passion blinds us from what the facts actually are. So I just had to ask that question because I mean, like every year since I've been paying attention to it, it always happens. And I'm pretty sure it's even happening right now as we speak, where
Probably.
people are like, how come this person is here or that person is there? And then they don't really pay attention to the criteria. But I actually do have someone who's watching us live on Facebook right now who had a good question about, I guess, keeping the criteria the same. If I can find it. Okay, here it is. This is Kelvin from BCP Plus. He says, "How hard is it to keep the criteria the same?" That's the question he had.
It's not very hard. It's pretty much the same every time. Um, the criteria is on 5 categories, and we will have the evaluation period. So it'll go from October 1st to September 30th every year. The criteria is in ring achievement, which is a win loss record, championships, tournaments won, influence, visibility, and prestige within a promotion and slash or the industry, technical ability, which is variety of moves, match quality, in-ring storytelling, competition, that success against the most varied and highest quality opponents who you wrestle, essentially, and then activity. You have to have a minimum of 10 singles matches, non-tag total, or barring this 6 such matches in separate months. And so that's typically the criteria. And the way that PWI works is because it's been around for so long. Different promotions are weighted differently, of course. So, some things are considered like a recognized world title. So even like when it comes to Mercedes, people are like, okay, like she has a whole bunch of nothing belts. She was never world champion of AEW. Okay, sure. But she has also held several titles for several major promotions. And that CMLL championship that she's holding right now is a recognized world title. CMLL is the oldest wrestling promotion in the world, and it's the top promotion in Mexico. And so she is a world champion currently, right now. And in addition to holding those belts, she held the New Japan belt earlier this year, holding the AEW belt. And so different. And so like, she's just one example, but it'll come in of like, people are like, okay, what's a good example on the list? Okay, so on the list, Takumi Iroha is ranked 1 spot higher than Utami Hayashishita. And Utami was the Marigold world champion. And Iroha was the GHC world women's champion. And so people are like, oh my gosh, well, she's the women's champion of Marigold. Well, Marigold, to right now, at least currently, is not a recognized like major yet because it's still a brand new company. And so that world title is still not ranked as like being like as high as being World of Stardom champion. Versus Aroha, yes, it's a newer championship, the GHC National Women's Championship. But however, Pro Wrestling Noah is considered like, a recognized major. So their women's title is considered a recognized world title. So you'll see like little things like that happen like throughout the list of, like about like what's a recognized promotion, what's what's a recognized world title. And so that also helps like with the criteria as far as like, ranking one person over another. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, that's not to say that the criteria is perfect. I did like that, and I think that's a personal question problem that I had last year, is that with the current criteria, there's always going to be a lot of, particularly Latin American, Latina, not Latin. I don't want to say Latino because like if they wrestle in some places, it's fine. But people who predominantly wrestle in Mexican promotions, a lot of times they will be at a disadvantage because in Mexico, like CMLL, for example, for the most part, it's a lot of trios matches, a lot of tag matches, a lot of, and they might get one match per card. And that match is almost always a 6-woman tag, something like that. And so they don't get a lot of opportunities to have 10 singles matches a year. You'll have like maybe like the top star will get like, an alternative. Like Stephanie HWP was one of those people in CMLL who obviously she was able to qualify while she was there. She was getting singles matches, but for just about everybody else, a lot of people weren't. And so that was something that, I was like, okay, like this isn't going to favor, a lot of people. But I will say this year, we have the most luchadors ever who are featured on this year's list, which is super awesome, from both CMLL and AAA and, a few of, I think, the Lucha Indies. There were more singles matches this year, but like that is something that you have to think about, like the criteria, because I said this is a global list, but wrestling, specifically women's wrestling, looks different in every single territory. It looks completely different, and so even something that I was even super um, conscious about this year. And I think Kristen Ashley, who's also on the committee, a really awesome person, was conscious about as well this year, is that we needed more luchador representation. So yeah, this year I really honed in. I was like, I need to start watching more CMLL regularly. I need to be more in tune with what they're doing, because I know this is coming up. Like, I know like the 250 is coming up. So like making sure that we're aware of what these women are doing so they can be included for like their really hard work. And so the criteria, it's there. It's not perfect, but I will say we're doing the work to make sure that as many people as possible from as many places all over the world are being included.
Absolutely. And that takes a lot of work. So, fans, if you're watching this, please understand that this is a science. If you gathered nothing from what she said, this is a science. This isn't just something that you just slap and put together.
No, it's
This
hard work.
takes many minds, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of researching, and it's a lot of science involved. Wrestling may be an art, but there is also a science to it, okay? So I feel that once people watch this, and as people are watching this right now, they're learning the basis of the criteria and realizing that it is not just a one and done thing. I love it. I love it so much. So, do you guys as committee members just meet throughout the year, as you're putting this list together? Or is it sort of something where you just sort of meet like maybe a few times out of the year, or even just like as it gets closer to, not saying it's a last minute thing, because clearly it isn't, but is it something that you guys meet like closer to the time of release, or how is it that you guys put it together and meet?
So we definitely meet closer to the time of the release. Just because anything can happen at any point in the evaluation period. You might think somebody is set to be, at a certain point during the year, and they might get injured. They might have a terrible rest of the year. They might have an even better rest of the year. Like you genuinely have no idea, like, what's going to happen. During the evaluation period. So we typically read to I even like there's a few people who I think have been much higher if their big moments had happened towards the beginning of at earlier in the evaluation period. Chris Statlander comes to mind. Like, she won the world title last week, I think, of the last final week of the evaluation period, right? Like, imagine if she had ranked, she probably, I don't want to say like definitively she would have been top 10, but probably, like, just little stuff like that. So we do meet towards the end of the evaluation period, and yeah, what's the best way to say it? Like, there's also stuff that happens intermediately. It doesn't always inform what we do, like in the sense of there's a weekly PWI ranking. And that doesn't mean that like we take a sum of it, like, oh, this person is going to be at the top all year, this person is going to be at, like, just because the list may change. Like, there's a women's list, there's a tag list, there's a men's list, and like there's, for example, Mercedes is one of them, right? Like, she was only on top of the list a few weeks out of the year, in comparison to some other folks in the sense of the weekly list. But she, if I'm not mistaken, she was the only person to never leave it. She was in the top 10 the entire year, which is consistency, like it is consistency. So like those things are happening, but the committee as a whole doesn't really meet until those last few weeks of the evaluation period. And even then, like, we're still having meetings, things are still subject to change because we're double checking criteria and stuff like that. So you might have somebody in mind, but you're just like, okay, it's a good example is Mercedes last year, right? We had the first meeting, we had her planned to go into the list, We had her spot already, like, set. But by the time of the end of the evaluation period, she fell short by one match. And so she had only had nine. And she would need 10, to qualify. And so that's why you can't make too many decisions, before that evaluation period is over, because you'll have stuff like that. Like, there's several major names who didn't qualify. I don't think, like, Becky Lynch wasn't on the list this year. Who
Hmm.
else wasn't? Trying to think who else, like, just different people, whether it's due to injury or, they just didn't have enough matches or stuff. That's typically how it goes.
Yeah. Um, that is a lot to really internalize and think of because, like, honestly, I because it's like you said, wrestling is always subject to change. There's always things that can happen that could change things up. But I think my follow-up question to that would be is there even a committee for the weekly list that comes out, or is there just one person in charge of that one? Because I have seen that one float around online every week. So who's in charge of that one?
I'm not sure if it's a formal committee, but I think there's like maybe one or two, maybe three people who have hands on it, every year. I mean, not every year, every week. And that's typically a global list of really kind of like, checking in, like, of like who's doing what all over the world. Typically going to have a focus on, your top champions from champions, top stars, AEW, WWE, TNA, Stardom. Though typically going to be people, but occasionally you'll see people who are so like just outstanding, and they'll find their way in. Sorry is one of those people of just. I mean, I think that she's still one of the most remarkable. I said this last year. I still find her to be one of the most remarkable people on this list. She's the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first freelancer to ever rank on the list in the top 10, and to do it 2 years in a row is pretty much unheard of. Like, to be a freelancer, you're not, committed to any one singular promotion. Pretty unheard of. And so, but it's typically the people in those major promotions you'll see on that weekly top 10. I think there's an indie list too. I'm not quite sure, because like that isn't like my particular lane, those weekly lists. I read them, but I don't really have a hand in writing them.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I just yeah,
Mhm.
I was just wondering myself like feeding into that and what happens with those cuz those are, pretty telling throughout the week to see, who's actually on top of it. And, the fact that it does weigh into the decision making for the larger women's 250 is also really interesting as well. So, in speaking to the cover of this year's women's 250, which we will get to in terms of talking about the top 10, because I do plan on getting into that. The cover did have, a lot of wrestling fans polarized in terms of the number one and the number two, in comparison to Timeless Tony Storm being number one last year when she had the cover by herself. Whereas this year you have number one and number two on the cover together with Mercedes and Timeless Tony Storm as number one, number two. So who was behind that decision, and can you, just tell the viewers and tell the fans, what was the rationale behind it?
Yes. So the rationale was that both Mercedes and Tony had solo covers over the past year. Mercedes was on the cover of the fall 2024 issue. She had it was actually a gold. She had only had two belts then. It was a Gold Rush themed cover. She had the TBS and New Japan Strong belt. And then the cover that immediately followed was Tony with the PWI number one, and it was the she had the solo cover with her Wembley photo. That was the holiday 2024 issue. So the rationale from both parties was that to do a cover together, like this is the first time in history that AEW has taken the top two spots. I mean, hell, like this, I don't want to. I don't want to like say this is fact, but I'm almost positive this may be the first year where no WWE star has ranked in the top three. Um, and I'm I'm almost positive that's a fact. With the top two coming from AEW, and then the third going to Saya Kamatani from Stardom. And so that was a feat for AEW in and of itself. So they did the photo shoot. So they took the pictures, and Mercedes and Tony decided to wear what they wore on Dynamite that night. So they did it like at a basically they did the shoot at a TV taping, and so that's really the simple answer of what happened. I know a lot of people are just like, oh my gosh, Mercedes should have had a cover with all her belts. I hear you. Um, that's just what happened. I think that is actually really cool too, of just that, that Mercedes would even elect to like share that cover of think about what she's done for women's wrestling. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Of just again, it's just shedding a spotlight, and just really allowing, I feel like, AEW to have that moment. Just because like it is really huge. I would say, like, for a 6-year-old company to say that two of the biggest star in the world are wearing their jersey and are really at the top of their game right now. So yeah, that's really that's the whole cover debacle.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to give you a chance to address that because here again, as fans going crazy for their faves, they have a tendency to be like, well, why didn't she have her own cover and Tony da 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 da? And then they sort of run with the idea that there was a bit of a conspiracy, but there is no conspiracy. It was an active choice for that to happen. And honestly, with AEW flexing their muscles that way, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. Like you said, for a 6-year-old wrestling company, that is a huge accomplishment for your two big women stars, your biggest women stars, to be on the cover as number one and number two. That you can't really ask for
Absolutely.
anything more.
And I think for a company like AEW, who has historically struggled with their women's division, I mean, their women's division
Hmm.
was their weakest link for a very, very, very long time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think a big reason for that is like when you think about when AEW first started, they started with several men who were established television stars. Like
Right.
you had John Moxley, you had Chris Jericho. Kenny hadn't been on TV, but he was, a big star. You had people who really kind of knew what they were doing. The women's division had none of those things. There were no established stars, and so they've really built this women's division brick by brick through recruitment, being able to recruit Tony Storm in 2022, being able to, recruit Mercedes, in 2024. These, the stars that they've been able to bring over, in addition to growing their own stars at the same time. And so this really happened really in a grassroots type of way. And so, like, to say that they've been able to pull this off all these years later, yeah, like, it's a huge achievement.
Absolutely. They deserve that, moment. So I agree with you there. Where there's I did read in the first part of the magazine that that Kevin McIlvaney did mention, people who were missing on the list.
Mhm.
Were there any wrestlers that you were sort of disappointed were not able to that weren't able to make the list this year?
Um, not off the top of my head. I saw that Hyan wasn't on the list, but the thing is, she was supposed to be. That was a clerical error. And I saw Kevin talked about took full ownership of that. But yeah, she was originally supposed to be on the list. Like we fully had her on the first draft. Sometimes like we write so many drafts of this list, like sometimes people's names get lost in translation, so that sucks. Who didn't get included? I can't really think of any. Oh, London Dior is somebody that I really wanted to see. And I think like if we had maybe 50 more spots, she probably would have been on. She recently was in the triple threat match with Maya World and Chris Statlander at the MPX, who runs the world too. I think that she's a great rising talent. So she's a person. I'm not sure. Did we have a Mira Blair in there as a wrestler? I'm not sure, and I don't think so. And she's best known for being a manager, and she's an excellent manager. In fact, last year she was the only woman. Wait, no, she was one of two women who ranked on the Manager of the Year list. But she's also a wrestler, and she's really been getting her feet underneath her as a wrestler, and so that's been pretty cool. And so I would like to see her. But yeah, I really, for the most part, I saw a lot of the folks that I really wanted to see featured, and so I'm really grateful. I don't know why I was saying I'm grateful, but it was super cool.
Yeah, so big ups to those women who, could have been on the list, but then clerical stuff happens. We're only human. You guys are only human, which I think is something that people tend to forget. Things happen, but it's okay because this is for a celebration. So, in terms of celebrating, I did see that the committee is made up of a who's who of women writers, such as yourself, Kristen Ashley, Candace Cordelia, and Krista B. Do you desire to see this committee grow over the next couple of years with more women?
Absolutely, absolutely, 1000%. I I and not just this committee. I think like a lot of the PWI committees, in the sense of there's just so much wrestling all over the world to cover, and I would love to see more global experts. And this is me saying that, like, I don't feel like I am a global expert. I would love to see people who know more than I do. Yeah, and like I think a lot of us, we each have our own area corner that we kind of like have expertise in, which is really cool. And I love the way that like we have a melting pot. So if we can just have more of that, I think that that would be awesome. But no, yeah, especially for a women's list, like in my, and like I would love like truly for the committee to be like 75% women if it was up to me. And maybe one day it will be not up to me, but one day it'll be like 75%. But yeah, I always rooting for one more women writers, creators, and voices to get through the door, because I think like this is important. You know, people always like these lists don't matter, this lists don't matter. They'll talk even when it comes to like Dave and the 5 stars and stuff like that. None of this matters. Like, listen, like at the end of the day, when it comes to our sport, like, in wrestling, there are very few truly reputable publications left. Like, truly reputable publications, reputable voices, and reputable measurement systems of how good anybody's doing at any given moment in time. And because of that, until somebody creates something that can replace these things, this is what we have. And it is important. It's one of those things like, yeah, the Grammys are don't always get it right, but that doesn't mean people want them any less, or things like I'm not saying like this is the Grammys, but it's the measurement system for our sport.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the excitement in so many of like the women, and like, not even with like the people from the major promotions, but for the indie wrestlers who are still, competing for hot dogs and handshakes, and they're still making the towns in their cars, and like this is their encouragement to not give up, right? Or for people who
Right.
didn't even make the list, like this is their encouragement to, one day make it. And so I don't take that lightly because I understand what it means to people. And I think because of that, it's on like the institutions and like as in like pre-existing wrestling media to really do the work to make sure that women's voices are represented. And that is one thing that I just can't say enough good things about Kevin, of just like, really building out this committee over the past few years, and not just the committee, but building out the staff period of, PWI is it was the first major publication that to give me an opportunity when I first got started, when and a lot of women aren't getting opportunities at major publications and brands and wrestling, and like that's just the truth, especially Black women, like, and I think we should be honest about it. But PWI is one of the under Kevin's leadership has been very intentional about bringing women to the table, women of color to the table. And I'm really grateful. But we can always use some more.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to see the committee grow. I'm happy to see that Kevin is making a concerted effort to include more voices. And I'm just really pumped to see the ones that he has put out there, including your voice as well. And speaking of your voice, you have a guest feature in this magazine. You
Yes.
have a guest feature in the W column where you discuss different shifts that happen with different female talents, and of course their various rankings and accomplishments, and even their family connections. So what inspired you to take this route with this article, and what factoid surprised you the absolute most when you were preparing to write it?
Well, first I want to give a shout out to Kristen Ashley, who allowed me to guest write her column. She typically writes the column, which is known as the W column. It's the women's wrestling column. But while we were doing committee meetings, and it was like particularly towards like I would say like the second half, like some of like the later meetings, I remember I was like saying like there's so many interesting factoids, like and probably first coming out of this edition, and I was like, like maybe we should like write like a facts and stats type of column, for that. And then I remember they were like, well, all of the pages are already assigned for like this issue of like of like this we wouldn't be able to really fit it anywhere. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Like I really and I really didn't think anything of it. And then I remember Kristen was like, "No, like this is a really good idea. Like I'll lend you my column, and you can guess right that." And so that was really nice. So like shout out to her. But I was just really proud of like so much progress, especially being on the committee last year versus this year, and like I could pinpoint the growth. Like I could see how much more competitive, women's wrestling had gotten, and like and just so many cool things were happening. And I was just like, okay, like I just wanted to center it around that. And another thing was that we don't include retired people in the list, and so but there were so many. I felt like impactful retirement this year, particularly in the Joshi world, to where I've felt like we do have to at least acknowledge some of these women. Sumi Sakai had a great Joshi style retirement match at the beginning of the year. What was that? It was at the New Japan. What is that show called? Battle in the Valley. Earlier this year in the States, and it brought together so many really cool people. And who else retired this year? Mako Satomura had a lovely retirement run, and she is still, booking Sendai Girls, which is one of my favorite promotions in Japan. Who else? Nanai Takahashi and Mari had her retirement earlier this year, and Marigold. And Tam Nakano had a retirement, which I feel like Tam Nakano's retirement match truly changed the course of, women's wrestling. When we talk about like Saya Kamatani's year, and where she ended up at number 3, and I mean, she doesn't get there if it's not for that match. There were so many records broken, and so I wanted to be able to talk about how impactful those women were, and just some of the cool factoids. Like I said earlier, the most luchadoras were ever included than ever before. Like there's, I think, what is it? 39, 38-year age gap between the oldest person on the list and the youngest person on the list. The oldest person being Aja Kong, Joshi legend. I mean, just absolute like legend. And she's not just wrestling; she's still having good matches. By the way, like she's still having a good matches. Somebody I genuinely enjoy watching wrestle. Well into her 50s. We have two sets of sisters on this list. Stardom stars Rena, Hina, and Hanan are the first trio of sisters to all rank in the top 100. And they have all been Future of Stardom champions. And Rena had one of the longest reigns of all time. I think she broke her sister's record. Hina recently just lost the belt. But there's some Rena specifically, and she's the highest ranking of the three of them, is one of my favorites. Women wrestling like today. That's super cool. And then there's another set of sisters, Tomoka and Azusa Anaba are both ranked back to back. They are from JTO in Japan, but also have primarily wrestled in Stardom this year. So there's just a lot of cool stuff. There was a lot of migration. You had Mayu Iwatani left Stardom, basically the person she built from Marigold this year. Mariah May became Blake Monroe this year. Mina Shirakawa, Megan Bain, Thekla all came over to AEW this year. They all had roots in Stardom. A lot of movements within the scene. And then what I really thought was most interesting is just that, how do I say it? I think everybody who is in women's wrestling has their own impact, right? And how they affect the future. But this particular top 10, like when you looked at this particular top 10, these are genuine needle movers for wrestling who have changed the culture, like as we know it. Mercedes, like the belt collector run speaks for itself, right? And then who's number 2? Tony. I mean, I think will go down as the greatest character probably maybe of our generation. Definitely for a woman, but I mean, one of the best talkers, one of the best moment makers, in modern wrestling today. And number 3, Saya Kamatani, who has genuinely made it her mission to get women back to the Tokyo Dome. And for an all-women show, made crazy history this year. The first time that women's wrestling is featured on Japanese television, I think, what was it, in 23 years? Just because of her popularity, just because of how popular she's gotten. They're streaming her matches on live network television because she's just that big. All-Star Grand Queendom, Tom Nakano's retirement match for the World Stardom Championship, set the record for the highest attended show in Stardom history, highest attended All-Star Grand Queen, and that's after they set the record, 2 years ago, with the show that featured Mayu versus Mercedes, and several other amazing matches. So we have people like Sari, who is creating, like I said, freelancing, winning the top belts of several promotions without even having a full-time contract, but also hosting her own shows, who for her own sold out women's wrestling cards, and they've all been successful. They've all sold out top to bottom, showing all the past, present, and future of women's wrestling. So you have Athena, who hit over 1,000 days as champion, which is a feat that very few people in wrestling have ever accomplished, and is also promoting her own shows, her own wrestling shows, women's wrestling shows. There's so many people who are genuinely inspiring. I mean, even Stephanie Vacker, in 2 years, held the titles for CMLL, New Japan, just about every belt that WWE has to offer. This is a whole new level of dominance. These women who have influenced a generation. And I don't even go as far, and don't get me wrong, bridges were 100% burnt. But though Stephanie, I think her success in CMLL definitely created a model that we're seeing the fruit from now, for them to invest more on women's wrestling. Like I see like the star power that has increased. It kind of felt like she was like a one-star machine, like like back then. But now it's several people being invested in. You have Persephone, you have La Catalina, you have Zoises, you have Olympia, who was recently on AEW television. And so these are people across the board who have genuinely impacted our sport. Even Naomi. I mean, like, as somebody who, I don't watch as much. I don't really watch WWE anymore, but she's always been somebody that I always loved, always followed. I subscribed to TNA when she was Trinity, and just to support her. I've always been so to finally see her get her recognition, being a part of the list when that happened, super cool. Like, I mean, absolutely awesome, of people who are genuinely influencing, like, the trajectory of our sport. And so I think it's just been really inspiring. So that's why it was really important to write the column. And that's really what I wanted to center it around, because like I genuinely was inspired, and I believe in writing things that you would like to read. Like I like writing things that about things that inspire you, and I was genuinely inspired. So
Yeah, this whole year left a lot to be inspired by. And even this year, I feel like a lot of conversations has been had when it comes to women's wrestling and the process of even aging, and how women are expected to stop at a certain age, whereas men aren't expected to. You have people like Aja Kong who are continuing to go. Like, you even have Trish Stratus, who was not on the list, but of course is a Hall of Famer, who had a match against a ranked woman this year in Tiffany Stratton. You have women like that who are continuously raising the bar and showing that womanhood in wrestling is not relegated to a certain point. And then of course you have even the family dynamics. Like, even though Cody Rhodes' theme song says this and is more geared towards him, in that song where it says wrestling has more than one royal family, you're seeing that with those sisters that you mentioned in that article. And I'm so very glad that you mentioned that, in that guest column, and I'm so happy you had that opportunity. So of course, as these fans are buying this magazine, they're seeing what you wrote about this. They're seeing what you contributed to this list. And Miss Ma'am, your voice is out there, a part of the best year that women's wrestling has ever had. Like, that's all you. That's great.
well, it's not all me. I'm part of
Well,
it.
I mean, you're part of
Yeah,
it, but
I
I'm
get
just
it.
saying. Like, I'm just giving you your flowers,
I
okay?
mean, they honestly, it just inspires me. It just makes me feel like I have to do more. Like, of just like, I feel like women's wrestling, for it to truly rise, is going to take everything rising. So that's not just the talent. That means we're going to need more women backstage. We're going to need more women in management. We need more women in media, to cover these things properly with the nuance, and the sensitivity, and just the honor that I feel like it deserves. Because, we have a long way to go when it comes to women's wrestling, specifically in North America, and how it's portrayed, how it's covered, how it's talked about. And it puts pressure on me, and not bad pressure, but just pressure in general, to where it makes me feel like, if they're getting better, I have to get better. If they're getting more opportunities, I have to make more opportunities, and like, if they're going global, I need to be going global. And so it just really puts a chip on my shoulder, to constantly keep going. And like, people get on me about this all the time. I'm just like, Lyric, you terrible at taking compliments, or you just like, you don't really smell the roses. I don't. I'm terrible at it, and I'm trying to get better. But I also am one of those people. I'm always thinking about forward. Like, what's the next thing? Like, what's next? Like, I'm already even thinking about like next year's list, of, okay, like, we don't have any African participation. We don't have this. We don't have that. So like, how do we get more of these type of women? Like, how do we get people from this corner of the world, this country? Like, seeing people talk about like, Diana Strong, who's wrestled Mercedes before, was like, she's the first Polish woman, ever represented. Somebody was like, they're the first woman from El Salvador to ever be represented. It's just like, okay, this is great, let's keep going. And so that's typically like where my mind goes of, how do we expand? How do we level up? And I think knowledge is power. And so even too of like, there are some women on this list, I will be honest, probably could have ranked a lot higher if more people were knowledgeable about what they were doing. Of just like that top three truly could have gone any order. Just about like if you really analyze what these women have accomplished, like that top three could have gone in any order, especially like I have to say Sayed Kamatani, like of just the things that she has done are things that I can't even just say very few people are doing. Like she's single handedly probably one of the top, maybe the top singular draw in Japan today. Like regardless of gender, which just speaks to women's wrestling is a draw. And I never want to hear otherwise. But yeah, so many amazing things to cover. And so I just can't get enough of it. There's always more to do.
There is always more to do. And I can say that's a lesson I've had to learn is how to smell the flowers and smell the roses too, because I'm real bad at it myself. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? But then it's like people around me tell me, like, look, you gotta really like pull back and realize, what you have done and just be grateful for that and be able to take compliments. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. I have to learn to be better at it too. But in terms of moving forward, we got to get into the top 10. Because, of course, on this show, we got to talk about the top 10. Because if we sit here and talk about all 250 women, we'll be here all day. And we don't have that. So we're going to start by talking about the top 10 women of the women's 250 from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And, of course, number 10 is a really solid choice, in my opinion. She is Rhea Ripley. She is the Eradicator, the Nightmare, Mommy, everybody's favorite girl crush. She is just out here. She has had an amazing year performance wise. I will say, even though there at the beginning of the year she had won the women's world championship, only to lose it as like in a very head scratching kind of way to certain fans. They were like she lost it to Io Sky, but then she participated in a triple threat match at WrestleMania with Io and Bianca Belair in a match that was very critically acclaimed. Everybody said it was one of the best matches of the year. She also participated in a match against Io Sky at Evolution that was critically acclaimed as well, even though it ended in a very abrupt and cautionary fashion, I will say. But Mommy just continues to prove how she is, the one of the if not the major star of WWE. Every time she comes out, people scream their voices out. Like I said, she's everybody's girl crush, man crush, all the things. Mommy is number 10. So Lyric, what was the rationale behind making Rhea a number 10? Because she was also number 3 last year. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that the rationale was just she didn't have as much of the many of the kayfabe accolades, as last year, as far as when it came to championships and title reigns. But I mean, she remains still the probably the most popular woman in the world. The most popular, women's wrestler in the world. And I think that for me personally, I can I can count on one hand the amount of actual WWE matches I've watched this year, but Rhea has been in several of them. And I think one of my biggest critiques actually last year was that I felt like a lot of like Rhea's ranking was based off of her popularity, but I felt like she didn't have a lot of great performances, honestly, of her. And it's not because like I don't think she's a great wrestler. I actually think that Rhea's a really good wrestler. I just think like a lot of times she wasn't given the opportunities to really like show how good of a wrestler she is, because it got too focused on like whether like the dom stuff or like triangle. But this year I feel like she was really able to kind of showcase more of that she is a really good wrestler. Like you said, I watched that triple threat. It is one of the best matches of the year. And I think that and I did watch Evolution is the only WWE show I've watched top to bottom in years. But that match that she had with Io was fantastic. It was fantastic. And so I think that number 10 was a really good spot for her this year. And like she, like I said, she remains the most popular woman in the world.
Oh yeah, she is definitely the it girl. And you are right. You do have a point about the kayfabe accolades, because when she won that title, that was on the Raw on Netflix premiere. That was in January, and now we're here, in November, and she hasn't been champion for a while, but her star power sort of proves that she doesn't necessarily need the title in that regard. And she had lots of amazing matches and pretty okay defenses, but not so many defenses as people would like. I think that's a critique that WWE has gotten in this new era that we're in, is that the champions don't really get a lot of defenses as we're used to seeing them get over the past couple of years. But once all of the love triangle and the Judgment Day stuff was out of the way, to your point, there was a lot more moments for her to shine, and that definitely shone this year. So Rhea Ripley is definitely a solid number 10. I agree with this. I'm okay with this. It's great. And of course, because she's so young, there's always
Absolutely.
room. There is always room for her to reach, the top 5 again, or a number 1. You just never know. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yes, I'm here for it. Yes, and I do wanted to just shout out to this, because this was one of the best matches I've ever been blessed to witness in person. I couldn't breathe. I was in tears because I didn't want this pay-per-view to end. I was there. I was just like, I can't. I don't want this to end.
It was a great show, and
Oh,
I'm very harsh about WWE stuff, but it
mm,
was a really great show from top to bottom. And I think
mm-hmm.
the presentation of it, the limited ads, the downtime. I mean, yeah, it was a really great show.
Yeah. I'd never wanted it to end. My heart is still in Atlanta. That whole weekend was a blessing. And of course, number 9, speaking of the match ending in a cautionary tale, we have Naomi, our favorite mother caution. She was
Absolutely.
number 30 last year, and this woman had a stunning and spectacular year within the evaluation period. She, of course, had her moment before the evaluation period with her being in the big 3 with Bianca Belair and with Jade Cargill, giving us a watershed moment in representation for Black women and their excellence. And then, of course, you have the trickle down story of who attacked Jade, her taking Jade's place as a women's tag team champion. The amount of matches that her and Bianca had. Of course, I know that didn't weigh into the decision making because it's for
Mhm.
singles and not tag team stuff. But I'm just listing her accomplishments.
Mhm.
And just her being revealed as the attacker, her switching her character to something completely unhinged that no one had ever seen from her ever, like to become Miss Proceed with Caution, and having a match at WrestleMania, having a singles match at WrestleMania against Jade Cargill, then of course winning the Money in the Bank briefcase, then cashing in at Evolution to become the Women's World Champion, defending her title successfully at SummerSlam, only to announce that she had to give up the title due to being pregnant with her first child with her love, Jimmy Uso. She's given us 9 months and some change to do what they want with their title because she's coming back. And because of that 9 months and some change, she's number 9 on the PWI 250.
Yeah, I mean, I truly, I honestly think that if she had won more as a single star pre the title, like maybe if she had won the WrestleMania match and like a few other things, she probably would have been higher. Of just, I've always thought that Naomi's very special, and I think that she's always been a very special athlete. She's always had a very special connection with the audience, even if her booking hasn't always reflected that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be honest, like, what at her proceed with caution run, like I would go and watch all her clips and segments once they came up on Twitter, just because like it was just so cool to finally see her have something to sink her teeth into. And I think so highly of her. Like I think so highly of her. I'm so proud of her. um uh like, you hate for a run like that to end, but it was for the best possible reason, obviously. And I think this is the highest she's ever ranked, and I think it's just very well deserved. Like I think she's put it all together, as a performer and as a character. And I think she just really shined. And I mean, obviously the committee thought exactly the same thing. And I mean, she had the accomplishments to go with it, like Money in the Bank winner, won the title, very captivating character that, had an impact on the audience. And yeah, I mean, can't say enough good things about Naomi.
Absolutely. She also had an impact on Halloween this year as well,
Yes, she
especially
did.
with
Yes,
me.
she did.
With me too. Like we were all in our caution tape, baby.
Yes,
Like
she
she
did.
really did impact us in an amazing way with this character, and I'm so proud of her as well. And then the idea that she could have very well been pregnant when she participated in that no holds barred match with Jada Evolution too.
And
That's
you gotta give
crazy.
her tens. She gotta get her tens for that. Like of just, being you can honestly say that you won a title. You won the world title pregnant, like of just black women. It is what it is.
Exactly. I know. And she'll always be special to me. And of course, me and her will always have that special moment in that press conference, which turned out to be the final WWE press conference. I'm so happy that we had that moment and I got to ask her about um, what the words on her caution tape actually meant to that moment and everything. So, her special year feeds into the special year that I've even had as a journalist myself. So it'll always be special, and I cannot wait to see her come back and raise more hell because this
Absolutely.
was amazing. Her acting was phenomenal in that segment when she told Bianca that she was the one who attacked Jade.
Yeah.
Like she let us know she was an actress, and then of course she was also in Queen of the Ring as well. Like it was just like she's just been operating on all cylinders, and I can't wait to see her come back and the story she gonna tell that baby. Oh,
Woo, man. Hope they
it's
know
gonna be
how
nuts.
mama is. Cause
Ex-
wow.
exactly. Now moving forward with number 8, we have is it Sorry or Saray? Because
Sorry.
it's Sorry. Okay, because I feel like when I first saw her in NXT, they were pronouncing it as Saray,
Yeah, that was her
and
name in NXT, Saray.
okay, but it's Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she was ranked at number 7 last year, and now she's number 8.
Yep. I even think like this could have gone either way, just because like she had she didn't wrestle as much as she did last year, but she did, pick up a few more accolades in the sense of she the title that she had been wanting for so long. She's a known fan of Antonio Inoki, who's the founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling. She won the IWGP Women's Championship from Shuri. And I mean, like I can't say this enough. The things that this woman has done, and to do it as a freelancer, is pretty much unheard of. She has appeared on Stardom, Mari Gold, which is essentially a rival of Stardom, on back-to-back nights. She has appeared on Sendai Girl. She's appeared now on Ring of Honor. She has collected a check from just about everybody. While remaining independent and true to her values, she sees wrestling through a lens of just that she brings the interesting parts of wrestling, like, that no company, no singular company will ever define her. And I think that that's such an interesting take for a woman, especially in wrestling, who, we're always trying to tell women, who they should be, who they should show up as. I just, her approach to wrestling is something that speaks so deeply to me, because like I still technically am a freelancer of just everything that I do. Like I love the idea of being able to show up in any part of the world at any given moment in time and do anything. I think that that's just really cool, and I think that's Sari embodies that. She's one of the best wrestlers, I mean, in the world, and that's even and I mean, like I think that women's wrestling is all should always be considered on par with men's wrestling, but when it comes to like no seriously, like she is one of the bar for bar best in ring wrestlers ever. The matches that she's had, I mean, look at the trilogy that she had with Shuri this year. Um, did she wrestle Mayu this year? I don't know. She wrestled Mako Satomura on her retirement run. Just recently wrestled Shihiro Hashimoto. Had a great match with Alex Windsor. Great match with Suzu Suzuki. In addition to, she's a genuine thought leader, like when she speaks, when she has interviews, people listen. She influences the culture of Joshi. She's taken several young women under her wing. Miku Kane, Chi Chi come to mind. She's very she's a I consider her almost like a player coach of wrestling, because while she's still in her in-ring prime, she's still in her 20s, which is insane. But
Wow.
she's also in that managerial standpoint as well. You're just like, she has an idea of where she wants women's wrestling to go. And she hasn't been shy about really inflicting that vision upon the world. And so, yeah, um, it's really that simple. Of course. And then holding the tag belts with the marvelous tag belts with Takumi Aroha. They, as Spark Rush, had a run where they were on top of the Japanese world, which was super cool. While they were holding the tag belts, Takumi Aroha held the GHC Women's Championship, while Sari held the IWGP Women's Championship, holding the women's world titles of historically the two largest men's organizations in Japan, which is even like a crazy feat in and of its own. She's performed everywhere. Yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah, it seems like her resume is just growing and growing and growing and growing. And here again, this is someone who we could see at the top of the list later on from
Absolutely.
just hearing what she has going on. Like that's really nuts.
If she committed to seriously, if she committed to a promotion, she might never do it, which I completely understand after the way that her
Mhm.
WWE went. But if she ever really committed to a promotion full time, or even just maybe did like a half and half schedule, like like over in AEW or something, and like she had more visibility, I think she would be almost unquestionable for top three, and potentially even number one. And that's just the God's honest truth.
Absolutely. We love to see a bounce back. So, of course, number 7, we have Athena, the forever Ring of Honor Women's World Champion. Now,
Right?
last year she was number 10, and I feel
Mhm.
like she is always a more polarizing person in the fandom because of the idea of how long she's been a dominant ROH champion, but yet has never really cracked the top 5 or even
Mhm.
been number 1. I've seen fans wonder why, why is it that she isn't ever considered to be on in the top 3 or even in the top 5 or number 1 because she's been champion so long and her dominance. So maybe can you speak to her
Yeah.
placement this year and her placement in terms of never really being on top even though she's been such a dominant champion over the years?
It's ROH. I think that that's really the major thing in the sense of the visibility factor of
Mhm.
even let's say like a Saya Kamatani, yeah, even if it's not a top US promotion, it's the top promotion in Japan, right? And so her at number 3 or even anywhere in that top 3 would have been justifiable. Athena, I think, still gets hindered by the fact that, Ring of Honor is still not watched as much, a lot of people are, and I say this as a person who does watch all her title defenses. This is just what other folks say. And then this year was a bit of a weird year. She took some time off at certain points of the year. I don't think she had as many standout matches as she's had in the past. In other parts of the ring, because you have to think she's been champion since December 2022. Some years have been stronger than others. Now, some of the matches that she did have were absolutely extraordinary, but they weren't Ring of Honor world title matches. And some of the matches that she did have, they were losses, with losses on AEW television. She lost to Toni Storm. She lost to Mercedes. And so I think all of those things have a factor in it. But at the end of the day, like I said before, very few people in wrestling history have ever had a reign over 1,000 days. And so what she's doing is still very unprecedented. And I'll be honest, I personally would have loved to see Athena higher, but I do understand that in where it comes to reach. And the thing is, in the moments where she was on these big stages, she lost. That's more of a booking thing. Even dating back to the very beginning of the year, she opens the year in the International Women's Cup on January 5th at Wrestle Dynasty. She lost that match and she got pinned. She was pinned in that match. When she AEW television Spring Breakthrough in the Owen Hart Cup, she lost to Mercedes. Forbidden Door, she lost to Toni Storm. And keep in mind, these are still big time matches. And but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where the booking and the reach of Ring of Honor, in some ways it can hurt her, despite her dominance. However, I genuinely think when she loses the belt, I think that she really actually could probably move even further up, which sounds crazy, but think it's probably true, at least from a visibility, standpoint.
Yeah, I feel like that visibility part is a huge component of it. And I honestly, just to share my opinion, in my opinion, I feel like she should not have lost to Tony Storm. I'm sorry.
I think
That's just how I feel. I should.
In the moment, I completely felt the same way. But looking back, I do think that it happened. I just wouldn't have, to be honest, I just wouldn't have put her in that match to start with. I just would not have had her challenging for the world title until she was going to win. Period. But looking back, I do think that Kris Statlander was the right person to beat Toni Storm. I think part of that is just because I think that you had to put over a homegrown star. Of Mercedes and Toni have done amazing work. I mean, just amazing stuff for AEW. But I think in the past year, 3 years since they've gotten there have been several homegrown stars who haven't really gotten a lot of shine because of how big that they've gotten. And I think that that's actually a really interesting point about this list, particularly this year, of Mercedes and Toni ranked really high, as they should have, but a lot of other people fell down from on the AEW side in this list. Willow is much lower than she was last year. Kris Statlander is also not as high as I think that she could have been. She was kind of saved last minute, I think, on some spots when she won the world title towards the end of the evaluation period. But I'll be honest, AEW really investing in those top 2 stars, and even you could say Athena by extension because of how long she's held this ROH belt. Them only going all in on maybe 2-3 people it kind of like hurt the value, the stocks of like, other folks. And so I think that it was important that Tony, when she did drop the belt, she dropped it to somebody like Chris Statlander. And so like that's just how I see it. I completely understand. Like I said, in the moment, I was like, why did Athena lose this? But if I could have done it all over again, I just wouldn't have had her challenge for the belt at all until they were ready for her to win.
Okay, now that you put it that way, I see where you're going with it. I understand a bit better because in the moment I was just kind of blinded. I was just like, nah, if she's gonna be dominant, let her be dominant and take the thing. But now I understand, from that perspective, I get it. Because Chris Statlander had been working her way up the ranks in AEW for a long time.
Since the
So
beginning,
she deserved that. So she did deserve that. I will say that. She deserved that top
yeah.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. They needed a homegrown, like, homegrown stars. Like, she is the best that they've ever produced. From like that original 2019 star like roster, she is the only real success story on the women's side. Like, Britt didn't really work out. A lot of these, most of these other people they're not even with the company anymore. Like, Chris Statlander has been like the tried and true backbone, of the division before any of these people were thought of, and even came over.
Yeah, so you're right, but Athena making number 7 this year. Now at number 6 we have Io Sky, who is someone that a lot of people were touting as number 1 because she had such an amazing year in and of herself. She was number 13 last year. But of course this year she had a pretty stellar year, winning the women's world championship off of Rhea, of course, earlier in the year, being a part of that amazing triple threat that we did mention when we were talking about Rhea at WrestleMania, and having a pretty dominant run until she lost her title in the cautionary tale at Evolution. And of course, her run with Rhea and them being partnered up going up against the Kabuki Warriors was very intriguing television. I will say that because having their friendship blossom the way that it has, I've been enjoying it. They're my kitty and bunny from Courage the Cowardly Dog. I've said that before numerous times. She continues to be entertaining and enthralling, even as recent as last night, coming back with Rhea. So she is still someone who you never get bored of watching. The Genius of the Sky is awesome. And number 6 is a pretty solid place for her.
Yeah. Io, I truly would, and I'm just one person, but I think a consensus for the committee, we would have loved to put her higher. The stats just weren't there in the sense of, yeah, she had like the belt, but she went so long without wrestling during that time, and like it's really, which is a shame because like I mean she's a person, like don't get me wrong, I think like she's grown leaps and bounds with her English and like her character, but the real selling point of Io Sky is professional wrestling. It's what she does within those ropes. And WWE really hindered her for months when you have her holding a belt and she's not defending it. Like, she wasn't wrestling as much as, a lot of people hoped that she would. And so, and like, you just think about that with like the other people on this list, and they are a lot more active, like, during that time, like, and I will say, because of how competitive it was this year, it didn't really allow for a lot of people to have too many gaps, or go without wrestling for too long of a time, just because everybody else was just so active. And so, yeah, Io, I genuinely believe, is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. She's somebody I think the world of, and I think that she is probably the best in-ring wrestler that WWE has. Man or woman. I think she's just one of the greatest to ever do it. And so I think really highly of her. And it's just a shame that she didn't wrestle more. Like I genuinely think if she had wrestled more, I think that she probably would have been higher.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned earlier. There's a different type of booking going on in WWE where they're not having their champions wrestle as much. I think they're trying to, I guess make it a little bit more special as opposed to having them wrestle all the time. But to a degree, when if they're not wrestling that much, it can hurt them in the long run. As you're not able to see more of what they have to offer in ring. But when you do see it, you can't deny it. And Io is one of those people. She has a very passionate fan base, as I bore witness to at WrestleMania. That was pretty insane. I knew people loved her, but just seeing it in person in real time was just like really like electric in the moment. So yeah, Io Sky is fantastic. She's one of my favorite performers, and yeah, her being number 6 is pretty solid for what she's done. But hopefully, we'll get to see more of what she has to offer. In ring wise, because we're seeing more of her layers as a personality on television. But
Mhm.
hopefully, we'll see more in ring wise because she's one of the best in the world, like you said. So now we're reaching into the top 5, and number 5 is a personal favorite of mine, Stephanie Vaquer, La Primera. Lord have mercy. The year she has had, she was number 6 last year. So her bumping up to number 5 only makes sense because Miss Ma'am, she grabbed my attention before she became WWE
Absolutely.
when I saw her wrestle Mercedes in that strong women's tournament, the first one. I was just like, who is this woman? How does she wrestle this way? And where can I see more of her at? And ever since then, I've just been a fan of hers. And just to see her, have the opportunities that she's, had, and seeing her win all the championships that she's had, even within her first year of being in WWE has just been absolutely crazy. And her winning the Battle Royal at Evolution, but of course, before that, holding both of the NXT Women's and NXT Women's North American Championships, and now being the Women's World Champion. It's just her rise is very inspirational. She's a very beautiful girl. Everybody goes crazy over her and the Devil's Kiss. But also, she's just an amazing performer. I can't get over her. And the fact that she wrestles in hoops. Like, I'll just never get over that. As a person who was raised by a hoop wearer, like, and as a person who wears hoops sometimes, the idea that she wrestles in them just kind of just
Crazy.
gags me. Gags me. But,
Yeah, I think she's another person who I think really highly of, and I've been watching her since she was in CMLL, and I've probably that she has probably one of the best, first 2 years in the company that like I've seen, like since she came to WWE. Probably the best initial push I've ever seen for a woman. The WWE ever give a woman, to be quite honest. Like, this is a lot. Like, winning winning both the NXT belts, winning the Crown Jewel belt. She won she's won the world title. But she really is a prize fighter. I mean, she's the type of person where I feel like it doesn't matter where she signed. Every company should have been ready to put a title on her immediately. She is one of the best in the world at what she does. I have no doubt she's only going to move further up this list. As time goes on, she's still fairly young. She is extremely talented. Even like when she talks about clearly even across language barriers, she is connected with the audience. The sky's the limit. She's a great wrestler. She had a great win record. It was pretty, a no brainer that she would end up, in the top 10, but specifically top 5. And like I said, if she had won the world title a little bit earlier in the evaluation period, she'd probably be higher.
yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the only thing that kills me about her winning the Women's World Championship is the fact that that she didn't have a match against Naomi, because
Absolutely, yeah.
that match at Clash in Paris, which was initially scheduled, of course, before we found out that Naomi was pregnant, that match would have done numbers, like absolute numbers. I would have been so excited for that, but it's okay because the match she had with Io at WrestlePalooza was absolutely nuts. So you can't really, you can't really be too ungrateful or too mad about what we got because what we got was fantastic. And of course, down the road, we could still see Stephanie Bakar versus Naomi down the road. But of course, I'm so happy she's number five. She's one of my faves for obvious reasons because Stephanie's rule the world. And she just does amazing work in the ring. So big ups to her for making the top five. And yes, I can't wait to see how she rises up because she's just fantastic. And her push is nuts. So yeah. Now number four, we have Tiffy Tiffany Stratton. Of course, she was number 32 last year. So this is a very considerable jump. Of course, she had a huge year after she um joined up with Nia Jax and then won Miss Money in the Bank in Toronto, cashed in on Nia, became the women's champion. And as the magazine put it, she only exclusively fought Nia and Jade throughout the year. She did participate in some tag team stuff, but of course that doesn't count. But yeah, like she only defended her title against those two in certain areas, which kind of disappointed me because there were other people on the SmackDown roster I would have loved to see her face off against. But then of course she only just recently lost the championship to Jade Cargill. And we haven't really seen her since, but she did have a stellar year for a rookie in talking about people who are just starting out because she was in NXT and she was a dominant heel there. But because the fans on television with Raw and SmackDown tend to cheer for people for different reasons, they kind of switch her over to trying to be, I guess, kind of a baby face, which might not have um, translated as well. But of course, she also had an amazing match against Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania, which was pretty cool. And her amazing match against Trish Stratus at Evolution. She really has proven that she has staying power. Because here again, this is another young woman who has a lot of time to grow and do more. So Tiffany Stratton, number four.
Yeah, I think her kayfabe accomplishments were just really strong. As far as like how long she held the title, and winning Money in the Bank, and she. I will say before she won the title, like her win loss record was a little iffy,
Hmm.
but she like you said, she held it even past the evaluation period, and so that was probably her strongest category as far as like in the criteria of just she really did have all the hardware to prove it.
Absolutely. And she is very talented. Now, of course, other stuff aside, we have to acknowledge the fact that she is talented and that she will more than likely be a little bit higher. I say maybe she could be in the top 10, if not within the top 20, if she continues on this trajectory that she's been on. But yep, she deserves number four spot because she did a lot of cool stuff this year. So big ups to her. Let's not and hopefully she won't be mentioning anybody else's boyfriends anymore cuz and husbands cuz that was not fun. That was not fun at all. Now, we reached the number 3. We are looking at Kamatani.
Hmm.
Saya Kamatani. Please charge it to my head and not my heart for the pronunciations of people's names. She had a huge jump as well, going from number 89 last year to now number 3, and she is a stardom wrestler. So of course, Lyric, I'm gonna throw the ball to you to tell us more about this lovely lady.
Yes. So last year, there was a big feud going on in Stardom with Queen's Quest, which is a faction that used to have Io Shirai, now Io Sky in it, Atami Hayashishita, and a few others. Saya Kamatani was in it. Azumi, AZM, was also in there versus Wada Odio Tai, which is the former top heel faction. And who there's been a lot of foreigners in there. B Priestley, Jamie Hayter is a former member. Uh,
Hmm.
who else? Momo Watanabe was also in there, was also in Queen's Quest as well at one point. But Top Heel faction, and so they had a war last year, and it was a steel cage match, and like the thing is, the loser had to be the last person in their faction, so everybody else had to leave. Saya Kamatani ended up the sole remaining member of Queen's Quest and was carrying the flag by herself until she makes this shocking turn and decides to turn heel. And then they decide to dissolve both factions and start a new faction called Hate. Thekla was in that faction for a while as well. And so she does this complete turn from, like, the person you see in the image here to like this evil Phoenix Queen. And it, at first, I will say, it took people a while to get into it because people didn't really believe it, like, like that she could really turn heel. It ends up becoming one of the most compelling characters in Japanese wrestling. And Tam Nakano was heading towards her retirement road, and she's also, Saya kind of really studied up underneath her for a very long time. And they had a match for the World Stardom Championship. It was title versus, and the loser would leave Stardom. And so that was when Tom lost the match and Saya won the match, and Tom officially left Stardom but remained in a freelancing capacity, asked for a rematch at All Star Grand Kingdom, and they would do title versus, no, they would do career versus career. And so loser would retire. And they had, to this day, one of, not just one of the best retirement matches I've ever seen, one of the best matches like I've ever seen. It's there's a lot of gifs and clips all over the internet about it, and they even had like a amazing final scene of them just sitting on the stage together, reaching out as the lights come down, and then it's just like in scene. But it was a genre breaking moment that really kind of ushered the next generation of Joshi taking over. And as I said before, this broke the record for the highest attended Stardom show of all time. Really set records. Saya starts becoming a TV personality. She's regularly on television, on talk shows, doing different things, like, because of her popularity, which led to her becoming the first women's match featured on Japanese streaming on Japanese television in over 23 years. And she won the New Japan Strong Women's Championship, and at that time we didn't even really know that. We didn't know the Wrestle Kingdom card. The only thing that we knew was it would be Hiroshi Tanahashi's retirement match and the debut match of Aaron Wolf, who was a Olympic gold medalist judoka. New Japan announces, they did a full press conference announcing that Saya Kamatani would be involved in Wrestle Kingdom, which is a huge deal in of itself. To do a press conference just to say that this woman is showing up. They didn't even have her match yet. They didn't have who she was going to wrestle yet. Did an entire press conference to say that she would be wrestling in the Dome, which is a draw in and of itself. It just proves how much of a draw she's become. And she's a double champion. She is the face of Stardom as we know it. She is currently petitioning to win the Tokyo Sports MVP award. There's a women's wrestling MVP award, and then there's a general MVP award. She has made the claim that she is the top draw in the MVP of Japan, and that she wants what has historically been the men's award. And if she wins, she'll be the first woman to ever win it. And I'll be honest, she has a very, very, very good chance of doing so. There are many people who will tell you that she could have been number one on this list, and that's quite true. She could have been number one. She could have been number two. I think number three is still a very fitting place for her, and very respectful of the year that she's had. But she is one of the true needle movers in women's wrestling today. And one of the top draws in Japan, and I think that she is one of the global stars that everybody should keep an eye on.
Yeah, from everything that you just said, because I'm on vacation, it sounds like I need to take my time
Mhm.
and find her stuff because everything that you're saying story wise and match wise, even in the comments, Kelvin is saying that, the match that you mentioned, um, which headlined was one of his matches of the year. So I really might need to take some time to look her up and see what's going on because she sounds like a pretty legit deal. In fact, so legit that she deserved to be number 3 on this list. Most definitely. And like you said, she could have been number 1 or number 2. I believe you because wow, that's a lot of lore there, and a lot of accomplishments there. So big ups to Saya. I'm going to watch your stuff later because Miss Ma'am, you got a story on you that I gotta figure out. Big ups to her for reaching number 3. So now as we get into number 2, let's get quiet. No, let's not do that. This is serious. Okay, this is serious business. Of the women's 250 this year, we have timeless Tony Storm,
Mhm.
who didn't have so big as of a jump because last year she was number 1 and she was on the cover. Miss Ma'am, I read that in the evaluation period, of course, she didn't do as much because this is where she was figuring out her identity again.
Mhm.
We saw her switch back to the Tony that she once was before she switched to this version of Tony. Then she switched back to Timeless and she got back to her championship winning ways. She had, oh my gosh, what seemed like the feud of the century with Mariah May, now Blake Monroe.
Mhm.
And she held on to that championship, beat Mercedes Monet at All in Texas, ripped my heart to shreds in Atlanta. Oh God, oh my God, my heart was all over the place that weekend. It was just too much. But anyway, she beat her in Atlanta, had an amazing run, and wound up losing the championship to a homegrown talent in Chris Statlander, like we mentioned previously. But she is still out here being as crazy as we know her to be, just being an amazing character, and also playing Clara Mortensen in Queen of the Ring as well. Just a who's who was in that movie for women's wrestling. I feel like that movie just sort of set the precedent for where women's wrestling spiritually was supposed to go this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah,
Tony,
Tony, number
Tony,
2.
I just, I can't say enough good things about Tony. I feel like a personal connection just because when my first ever AEW show when I had watched AEW before plenty of times, but like the first time when they made their debut in South Carolina, that was Tony's debut in AEW. And so when I ended up going to my first ever pay per view, that first time ever, leaving home to go to a pay per view, I went to Newark for Full Gear 22. I got to meet Tony, which was really cool. And then, like, when I recently went to All In, I got to interview Tony at the press junket, so that was really cool. But I think she is one of the most transcendent, dynamic, and complex characters that wrestling has ever seen. I think that she is one of the greatest young stars like in the world. Because I mean, like Tony just turned 30, which is crazy. When she spent so much of her early years focusing on the fundamentals, as by the time she turned, 24, 25, she had already been World of Stardom champion. She had already won a 5-star Grand Prix. She had already been NXT UK champion. She had already won the Mae Young Classic. And, so in these later, in the second half of her 20s, all she had to really worry about was really fine tuning that character. And I mean, she absolutely did over the evaluation period. I mean, the reign of dominance that she had in AEW, of like, all the people that she beat. But I think like, the story with Mariah, the easily the most complex women's story that AEW has ever told. Easily, I think also I would say maybe a top 5, top 6 storyline AEW history period. I mean, I think one of the defining storylines of this decade of professional wrestling that was told there. The wins that she picked up, defeating Mercedes, defeating Athena, and then eventually losing to Chris Statlander. I think the story of um, all these people in hopes of becoming double champions, and she's made it very clear. She became synonymous with the AEW Women's World Championship. Like, it's hard to look at that belt and not think of Tony, just because of the work that she put in. And I think the global ambassador that she's been for AEW, she is easily one of the, maybe you could argue she's the face of the company. Has been, and the company invested in her in a way that they haven't really invested in a lot of women. And she was kind of like the test run. And I think, like, we're starting to see now, other women are getting those pushes. But I think that Tony, it really all begins with Tony when she enters, the division initially. And I think also, too, in addition to being the biggest star, she's also the biggest workhorse, too, of just Tony. There's several weeks where she'll show up on Dynamite and Collision and do it again next week and the pay-per-view. And, she was, even when she was off camera with the Amnesia storyline, she was showing up for AEW's international partners. She returned to Stardom. She was performing in Arena Mexico and CMLL. She was showing up in Australia and leading, the promotion for AEW's debut in Australia. You can't ask for a better quarterback than Toni Storm. And I think even with all of Mercedes' successes, this is still very much Toni Storm's division. And I think that that's been, and everybody has risen from that. Everybody has gotten better to, kind of meet Toni where she is because of the devotion that she's laid down. And like, she's another, it could have gone anyway. I mean, first North American 5-star women's match in history, Hollywood ending. I mean, she was pivotal in the debut of Megan Bayne, on pay-per-view in AEW. Even looking at the way that she got Chris Statlander over, even after being pinned at All Out, of all roads in the AEW women's division lead to Toni. Everybody has to go through her. And she's an ace. Like, she's just the ace. And yeah, well-deserved number 2. Could have easily gone anyway.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel like, to think back on seeing Toni's journey, from seeing her in the Mae Young Classic, a part of me always felt like she could be a star because she just had everything wrestling wise. And I just thought she always just looked cool. Anyway, like, I knew she could be a star, but I just did not imagine her being as big as a star as she's gotten now. And just seeing who she's, being a star with, even with AEW, it's just kind of like, bruh. Like, I never imagined this, and I also never imagined it being this type of character either. Like, this old Hollywood girl. Like, it is one of the most enthralling things, that any person could ever witness. And it's just, you just never get tired of watching her no matter what she does. And as a wrestler, she is one of the best. And her being on this list as number 2 is just absolutely fantastic. And it's a testament to how much growth she has. But then, of course, I also know that her being number 2 is a testament to the growth of another woman who we have to get to, because she is my absolute favorite. If you watch the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, you know that number 1 is, in my opinion, the greatest women's wrestler of all time, my absolute fave, my goddess, my queen, Mercedes Moné, the
Absolutely.
CEO, 12 belts Moné, and counting. For all we know, she could have won a 13th and we just don't even know about it. I
Who
don't
knows?
know. Either way, she is the rightful queen of the PWI Women's 250. She was number 26 in 2022. She was not listed in 2023 and 2024 because of that ankle injury that she sustained. She had to rise above that injury because at first the doctors told her she could never wrestle again. She said, "No, ma'am." And she rose and battled back and signed with AEW, became All Elite Monet, won the TBS Championship in a stellar match against Willow Nightingale, and proceeded to go on a golden role model 2.0 rampage throughout the land, throughout the planet Earth, and win championships everywhere. Wrestle matches against talent that people might not, that casual wrestling fans and even diehards might not have ever heard of in their lives, in promotions that have seen significant growth since she has decided to wrestle in these places. But people want to swear up and down that she is holding women's wrestling back. She is not. She is making it an attraction all around, not only for AEW, not only for CMLL, but for other promotions throughout the globe. She needs to go to Africa. Anyway, regardless, for all that she has done and for the way that she has bounced back and won all these championships, Miss Mamas deserves her flowers as
Great.
not only the greatest women's wrestler of all time, but as the number one on the PWI Women's 250. She should have been number one a long time ago, but I digress. She is number one now, and we'll take it. Now I'm finished being insufferable. I'll let Lyric talk.
uh, I just there was never any question in my mind personally that she was going to be number one. At least she was going to be my vote for number one. I can't speak for nobody else. As somebody who's been watching Mercedes since like the beginning of her career, she's been so influential on me. And I think just seeing her evolve and also see her start over. I think as women, so many times, it's really hard to start over. I think with anything, whether it's a career, whether it's a relationship, whether it's with like, it's so hard to start over. And I can honestly say I've probably been more critical of Mercedes over the last 2 years than I probably ever have in her career. And because I think with being a top star, you have more control over, not creative control, but you have more control over, I think, what you're portraying to the world. And some things, like, some things work, some things haven't. But in that time, I've also grown to respect her even more, is because we've watched her build Mercedes Monet in real time. Like, build this character, this new character for herself, this new persona for herself in real time. We've watched her try things and it fail. We've watched her try things and it work. We've watched it and we've seen her. I've seen her, and it's so funny when people say like, "Oh, she's has such ego and she can't take criticism." Absolutely, she can take criticism. Like I've seen so many things on this run where it hasn't worked, and she'll tweak this or she'll tweak this when it makes sense. When criticism makes sense, she'll take it. But a lot of you don't have anything real to say. But we've seen her really build this character and like what she wanted to be and develop it and develop, the impact that she wants to have. And I've just really appreciated being able to watch her journey and watch her be so brave, like I'm gonna be honest, like as somebody like breaking away from like dominant culture and mainstream like wrestling, it's hard, like it's very few spaces that currently exist in alternative and international wrestling. It's not going to be, the most talked about things on most of the blogs or dirt sheets that you read. It's not going to be the most, just widespread thing. But she took a risk and it's 100% paid off. And she's pulled up everybody else with her, which I think has been really cool. And she's just, I'm glad she knows that she's much bigger than any one company, or that she's just as big as wrestling itself, which is limitless. And history is going to really be kind to her in a way that the present isn't. That's a really good comment. History is going to look at this period of time with great fondness as it relates to Mercedes. Everybody isn't going to understand it right now, and I think that that's okay. And I think she's a visionary in professional wrestling, a true visionary. And a lot of people call themselves visionaries, but like having the foresight to understand that, you know, you're going to get a lot of backlash for what you're doing right now. But like the impact, when you look through that list at 250, there are several women on it that likely probably wouldn't have been on our radar if she did not wrestle them this year in some of these indie matches. And that is the truth. Diana Strong is one of those people, right? She said she was the first Polish wrestler to ever be featured on the 250. I wouldn't even know who Diana Strong was if Mercedes didn't wrestle her this year. And that's the truth. You know, like, you know, I'm not even going to sit here and pretend like I'm just so knowledgeable. I know this person, that person. I don't know everything, you know, and there's several people, even like, you know, and if you see like the accolades this year, it'll be like they wrestled Mercedes this year. That's one of the highlights of their year. That's one of the highlights in several of these women's careers. Being able to wrestle the greatest of all time, you know, just on a whim. Like, you know, just because, just for the thrill of it, for the hell of the game. Like, you know, and I think especially now when I think the American indies and just the independent wrestling is in such a dire state right now, and is in such a is things aren't looking too good. And I no mean to throw shade. Actually, I do like of just Mercedes Moné has done more for the indies than the WWID program has, and that is the truth. And when you look at the impact on the indies specifically and what she has done, you can see these people are subscribing at rates that they never have before. People are showing up in ways that they haven't before. People are engaging with our social media comment to our content in ways that they haven't before, of just these small indies in the middle of nowhere that nobody even knew existed. Suddenly everybody's watching this because, oh my gosh, Mercedes is wrestling there today. The future of independent wrestling will be determined by women. And I truly believe that. Look at all the stuff that's happening with Pro Wrestling Eve right now and all the AEW girls going there. Chris Statlander, Nyla Rose, Willow Nightingale. You know, Megan Bain is regularly on the indies. Like, look at the culture that she has set. Like the entire culture has shifted of to be a top girl in all elite wrestling. You can't just wrestle in all elite wrestling. You have to go a little bit everywhere. You got to show up. You saw what that Tekla, Sky Blue, Julia Hart, Mina Shirakawa all showed up this year at the CMLL Women's Grand Prix. Look at the International Women's Cup to get one women in at the Tokyo Dome at Wrestler Dynasty. Look at these opportunities that are being created. Megan Bain back in Stardom right now. Of this is a global revolution, and that's why I think that it's perfectly fine for Tony to be the ace of AEW, because Mercedes is the ace of professional wrestling. You know, she's the global ace. You know, in the sense of that person that everybody is, you know, looking towards. Like, you know, she's everywhere. She has, you know, the relationships, the foundational relationships that AEW has constructed with their partners, with CMLL in Mexico, with New Japan in Japan, with Rev Pro in Britain. Mercedes has been a crucial part of all of this. All In weekend, she wrestled what, 4 or 5 nights in a row? From Dynamite and Glasgow, 2 Rev Pro shows back to back, and then not All In weekend, sorry, Forbidden Door weekend. And then, you know, Forbidden Door in the O2 arena. This time you're not going to see this again. I guarantee it. And most people, what other WrestleMania main eventer you know is purposefully taking on a schedule like this? There isn't any. And there will never be another. It just won't. It's not going to happen. She is a one of one. CMLL, Mercedes Moné main evented the highest attended North American women's wrestling show in 7 years since the first Evolution. Her match with Persephone in Arena, Mexico. The numbers that they did, they had to put that show on Triller outside of regular YouTube to make it available with English commentary for international audiences just because of the grand scope of the audience that she brings. She's incomparable.
Mm-hmm.
And there, you can even do a statistic right now. If you currently take the rosters of WWE, AEW, CMLL, Stardom, maybe TNA, just count how many of the rosters of all of these people has she wrestled. You can just count. She has wrestled everybody's best. Everybody's best. Everybody's best. No one else can
The,
say that.
the only thing she hasn't done is wrestle. The only thing she hasn't done is wrestle Wow's best, but that's another story. Because I
Is
am
wrestle
sort of
who?
just a part of me is low key manifesting like,
Who should not wrestle? Oh, I think she's breaking out.
all right, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Um, yeah, I don't know what happened, but I just said the only thing she has not done is just wrestle the best of WoW, which I
Oh yeah.
personally feel like if she were to go and challenge for the WoW World Championship, that would be awesome. But yeah, um, she like you were saying, like she really has wrestled a who's who. She is the bar. She is just absolutely enthralling. And as someone who also watched her wrestle, I can say she is
Hi. You're muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay. So I think I'm back.
Yes.
Lord have mercy. Okay, I don't know what happened. Like, so much just happened within the span of a few minutes. I don't know what's going on. Um, Technology. Gotta love it.
You know?
So, what more do you have to add about number one? Because I think that's kind of where we were left off at, and you were on a roll lyric.
Oh, yeah. I really feel like I said mostly everything I had to say. Listen, like she earned this the hard way. And I feel like with great power comes great responsibility. And Willow and Harley Cameron said in the interview of just like everything that Mercedes has asked for, she has proven that she can carry it. And I think that that just speaks volumes. And she has put on a lot of the belts. It might seem like to people, to a lot of people, it's like the belts might seem like, oh wow, she's just full of herself. Anybody who understands like wrestling knows like that is a lot of responsibility to take on. Like you are responsible for making your own promotion look good, representing your own promotion, representing all of these other promotions, defending these belts, traveling here, there, and anywhere, and being available. She is the fact that she has done that. She is on a whole like it's so much responsibility, but she's proven that she can carry it. And most people aren't built like that, but you can see the hunger that she has placed in the rest of the roster to be able to do stuff like that, and carry all these extra belts and stuff, and represent multiple companies and promotions and partners and things like that. And plus her match quality speaks for herself. She's had several of the greatest matches of her career since the beginning of the evaluation period last year, which was her full gear match with Chris Statlander. Um, First woman to wrestle in Arena Mexico, Wembley Stadium, Tokyo Dome, Madison Square Garden. Um, she's done it all. This is beyond deserved. Like I said, she was always going to be my pick for number one at this rate, and there's still so much left for her to do. And so yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, and I would say, of course, as a person, like as someone who is, finding their footing as a writer, when I say one of the greatest challenges I had this year was narrowing down a top 10 for her career.
Same. I just did it as a Twitter, but it was so hard. I mean, she's had so many excellent matches, and I mean, just excellent stories, and and I think a cool thing about Mercedes is knowing that it's liable to change. These It's always liable to change. What I thought was her best match ever 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is no longer what I think that anymore. It's And what I love is that she's been so open to change, and I think that when it comes to the four horsewomen specifically, but particularly her, a lot of them are painted in a corner for like things that they've done in the past. But specifically for Mercedes, because she was so young, she got painted with this brush that the greatest moments of her career had already happened. In the sense of, main eventing, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn and the Bailey match, and at 23, and especially with her WWE career, just like, oh, all the great moments of her career have already happened. Like, she's already peaked. And I love the fact that she's pushed back on that in the sense of like, my career's just begun. My great moments are just starting. And I think it's reconditioning fans to believe that too. And I think also there's so many fans that believe that, oh yeah, well, this was the pinnacle of everything. This is the only way, the true peak of wrestling. This is the true, great thing. But then what Mercedes is doing, she's teaching you new peaks of just like, of new goals, of new what are new things to aspire to in wrestling that might not be centered around WWE or might be centered around WrestleMania. New levels of pageantry, I mean, even on fashion, like, she is wearing custom pieces to independent shows, like, of like, no one else does this. Nobody else will probably ever. Well, people are going to start doing this, and they'll get the credit for it. Like, it wasn't her idea. That's how it typically goes. But this is all these things are unprecedented. I even said that in the meeting. I said we are comparing. I said when it comes to like my argument for Mercedes is number one. We are not comparing of what did she do that was so much better than everybody else's. We are stating like the real argument is that has anyone ever done the things that she's doing? Has it ever been done before? It's not a, oh yeah, well, this person on this list is doing this and this. She's doing things that have never been done before. Who is competing with her? You know, um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, she's redrafted her own ceilings. Like people told her like that certain parts of her career that was the peak. And she has rewritten that. She's doing new things. She's doing Blood and Guts tomorrow. I'm excited. I'll be heading to Greensboro to be there. Um, I'm really looking forward to. I have no idea what she's going to do. Um, I'm really interested to see. I have no idea. Like, is she gonna go all the way? Is she just gonna like run away scared? Is she gonna give us a little tea? I have no idea. Um, but it's just she's so interested in challenging herself, which I think is just so admirable, and a lot of people could learn from.
A lot of people can learn from it, and she definitely did deserve that number one spot on the women's 250 this year after years of almost being there, sharing the spotlight with others, she definitely deserves her place at number one. And I am so sorry for those technical issues, but
Okay.
we have reached the end of our time together. Thank you so much for coming on this day where we're celebrating women's wrestling with PWI and just everything that women's wrestling has done this year and just celebrating these women, of course. The if the digital version of this issue is out now, so you can purchase it on the PWI website. And of course, if you want to get the physical copy, which I will also be doing because I love physical magazines, physical media is important. It comes out next month, but reach out to PWI on socials to see what that date is so you can go to your nearest bookstore and
December 2nd.
purchase.
Yeah, December 2nd.
Yeah, December 2nd. See, not even that long. You can buy it on December 2nd at your bookstore. So, Lyric, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling
Thank
Podcast for
you.
this exclusive time to give your knowledge as to how this list was put together. So, tell everybody where they can find and follow you and what you've got going on.
You can find me at Lyric Wrestling on Twitter and Instagram. You can find my writing between PWI and the Takedown on SI. On Wednesdays, I co-host Girls on Graps on Wednesday afternoons over on Wrestle Purist. And at nights, I co-host the Dynamite Diaries, the Dynamite After Show with Danny from Black Girl Wrestling. Um, I'm not sure what my schedule will look like tomorrow because I will be traveling, as I said, to Greensboro for Blood and Guts. But typically on Wednesdays, I'm all in the same spot. So just on social media, I'll keep you informed. But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Today was a big day, so I'm happy you were able to come on and also deal with my technology issues. Oh, I hate it. I'm sorry. So, of course, you can find and follow me, your girl Stephanie Hardy, on Instagram and Twitter at Queen Steph Hardy. Follow the show, The Hardy Wrestling Podcast, on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is The Hardy Wrestling Podcast with HWP in the middle of the diamond shaped ring. And also follow Bianca Addison everywhere. She is the new co host, so please show her some love as well. Follow me on TikTok at Stephanie_Hardy4. And also read all of my articles on Daily DDT as well. I'm still working on some things there and just be on the lookout for those things. And of course, just continue to reach out to your girl for any bookings if you're interested in having an electric and exciting voice for ring announcing, commentary, or interviewing. All the things, I'm open to do it. So, of course, this has been the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy and Lyric Wrestling weighing in on the PWI Women's 250 2025. And until next time, bye, y'all.